Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming today. Today, we are talking about finances. We are talking about overcoming financial infidelity. And we have an amazing financial coach here with us today. Her name is Janice Philwright Griffin, and I'm going to hand this over to her and while I share my screen to let her get started.
Well, good afternoon. How's everyone? Hopefully, we're going to get started now. I'm going to tell you something. This works best if we have interaction. So I'm going to check in with you from time to time to answer your questions and see if we can't delve deeper into a topic. So, because it's really important to understand that more than half of marital relationships end in divorce, and now they say it's closer to 60% due to financial issues. So we're going to talk about a couple of things where it comes to actually the mistrust of financial issues. And we're going to cover financial infidelity, but we'll also talk about different things like romantic scams and when dealing with elder care. Sometimes, if you're in a situation where you're dealing with others and how they manage the family finances and how that betrayal and how to bridge those gaps. So, we're just going to go ahead and jump in and get started. So, again, my name is Janice Wright Griffin. I am the financial coach of the Northeast region. And so, love to be able to sit down with anyone who has questions or concerns or feedback as to what more you would like to hear from us, because as your coaching staff, we're here to serve you. So, let's talk about what to do when love and money hurts, because we often think, okay, I love you, you love me. This shouldn't be that difficult, but actually, it can be. And so we're going to actually get into why it is so difficult and some of the barriers that we may have in dealing with that. So let's just jump in and get started. Next slide, Jana. Okay. So what is financial infidelity? Well, basically, it's when we're just not being honest about the money. And that's really huge. And really, what it comes down to is that money secrets can really damage trust. And for a lot of times, many people are together in relationship, and to be honest, really rely on each other financially. And so when you don't have that actual shared trust, that can be something very difficult to deal with. And so what we want to also do is talk about how that relationship can be recovered. So if there is a breach of trust, if there's a financial mistake, how do you recover from that? And we'll talk about money traumas and background issues and how we can actually overcome that. And then we want to talk about why this topic matters. And it really matters because you have to think about it. When you're dealing with relationships, you must have a foundation of trust. And that's trust emotionally, physically, financially, and all those are building blocks to a great relationship. So we'll cover the money side today. Next slide. So let's talk about what it actually is. And it's really hiding financial information. I know for a long time there used to be like a long running joke about, women hiding their new mall purchases in the trunk of the car, waiting to sneak them in and things of that nature. And truthfully, it's really not a laughing matter. And it's really something that we should be able to actually not talk about, be able to talk about our purchases and how the money is spent in the relationship. Or it could be something as simple about lying about spending or even debt. I know with many people dealing with online relationships, a lot of times we don't have the typical standard relationships where you met Mrs. Johnson's son and you've known him for the past X amount of years and he grew up around the corner. So we had that relational, communal information on one another. And things were not so secretive. We're such in a close connected community that it was easy to understand. But now you can create a new online relationship and recreate yourself, and no one knows what's going on with name changes and picture changes and plastic surgeries and AI creations. Someone can really develop a whole new persona. So we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. And then, of course, something as simple as making financial decisions alone. Many times when dealing with certain relationships, I've had clients who believe they were dealing with an ours situation. Come to find out, we were really dealing with a his and hers situation. And not that one is good or bad, but what makes it bad is not having that clear communication, understanding which is which and what is what. And then, of course, removing a partner from the ability to choose. Um, I know that one couple I was counseling, um, they had talked about debt reduction and not getting debt. And he went out and bought her a car for her birthday. And so she did not feel that that was a great birthday present because now it meant something that she was going to have to help pay for, when in fact, what she was really looking to do was to use the extra income to further her business. So he took away that choice that they had made together. So again, all those things really equal up to financial infidelity. Next slide. So, what are some common forms of this? Because again, we like to give labels to things and definitions, but we really want to know the nitty gritty. What does it really mean? And basically, it's secret spending or having a separate account. I know in certain cultures, um, it was taught that a woman should always have a little money on the side, the coffee can money or the money under the mattress.
This is something for financial, overcoming financial. I apologize.
That's okay. Overcoming financial infidelity. Yes. And so again, and culturally, that could be a bad thing because again, it breeds distrust. And then of course, there's hidden credit cards or loans. Um, I dealt with one couple where the gentleman in the relationship had a gambling problem. So he was going out and getting loans at first. He was getting loans from the bank. And then, but of course, once his credit was being hit, that was being discovered. And then at one point, he was getting loans from his 401k. And that was something that she was not able to see. But anyway, these were done in secret. He was doing this in hiding uh, so that he can continue to hide his gambling problem. And then, of course, lying about income or debt. That's a surefire way. And then sending money to someone else, whether that is could be an extramarital affair, sometimes in blended families. Um, People are sending money to their children without the other spouse knowing, or giving money to family members. Again, it's just really not being clear or honest about what's going on with the finances, especially if you are in what we call a shared money vision. Next slide. So, why does this happen? Well, for a lot of reasons, people do it out of fear of conflict, especially if you come from an environment where there were always money arguments. So some people have true money traumas where they don't feel comfortable discussing money or money problems. So that fear of just saying, you know what, if I just avoid it, it'll go away. And you have some people who kind of have kind of the ostrich in the sand kind of mentality. to where they say, I don't want to know anything about the finances. You handle it all. It's all your responsibility. And that's not a good way to be either. And some people actually feel shame surrounding money, whether it's the salary that they earned or where they come from. And so money trauma and money shame really governs a lot of people's current adult behaviors. And a lot of times it's avoidance of the hard conversation. If you know it's going to lead to an argument, you just might as well not have it until it's quote unquote discovered. I had one client that would always, she would always hide the bills. She would always run home to the mailbox. And of course, this was years ago when we were still receiving everything by mail. I'm going to date myself here. And she was always, as she would put it, paying the light bill on the pink, meaning it was right before the disconnection notice. And she always felt that anxiety and that fear and always trying to make things seem that they were okay when they were not okay. So just avoiding the conversation. And again, it could be a learned bad behavior from the way you were raised, how your parents handled money, and just trying to figure that out. Can I get some input from those of you who are online? Have you ever experienced money trauma or had a bad money pattern from the past that shaped your adult family, your adult actions on how you deal with money now? This works best with audience participation.
Feel free to put it in the chat or unmute yourself. You don't have to say what it is. You can just say, yes, I've had trauma.
That's
But you don't
correct.
want to be that person. I'm sorry. Is it Sharon?
Yes, that's me.
Yes.
I have to tell you, my parents were opposites in many ways. One was more of an extrovert, one was much more reserved. My dad was very extroverted. He was more of a spender. My mom was more of a saver. But because they had that balance, and my dad truly believed happy wife, happy life. He that balance worked because my mom was able to rein him in if it was not, if he, and he was, but the interesting thing is, even though he's more of a spender, he was very adamant about monitoring everything back then on the checkbook ledger. And he, even to the point of whenever my mom would go shopping, which all of us were, he liked to have sales. My mom was definitely a salesperson. I'm very much a deal person, but he would always tell my mom, spend whatever you want. But if you write a check, I need to know how much it is so that I can balance. And he would still do those things, but he would still be more quick to spend money, but not to the point where there was a negative, not that there was a deficit.
Great. And the good thing about that is that, and I always say, a spender always marries a saver. It just always happens that way. But I will also say this as well, is that what you could glean from that example was that they had a communication style that allowed them to both understand each other as well as how they operated. And that's what I often say too. You cannot compare yourself to how someone else manages their situation. Because I often would get when couples would come to me, should it be joint accounts, not joint accounts? Should we do this or should we do that? And it's always best to figure out what works best for you. And so I love that example because, again, that is something that you can glean from, if nothing else, learning that the communication is the key. It isn't the methodology as much as it is the communication. Next slide. So now we're going to talk about the trauma of financial betrayal, because it's one thing to have in your mind, this is the way it's going, this is what we're going to do. And then all of a sudden, that doesn't happen. So let's talk about what that loss of trust looks like. It can create anxiety and fear, because typically what we find is when we have one area of life that isn't working, we tend to put it across the board for everything else. You know, so we say, so if you were lying about this, are you lying about that? And that really breach of trust can cause a lot of fear and anxiety. And another thing, I was dealing with one couple, and her thing was, now I feel like I don't know who you are at all. And, you know, and of course, this person came to see me as a financial coach, and I recommended a therapist as well, because there's some things that are beyond my pay grade. But I did let her know that it's important to isolate one problem at a time and deal with one thing at a time and not make it a blanket statement. Because again, we could be dealing with previous traumas, things of that nature. And then it's just that feeling of unsafe, feeling that I don't know where I stand. I don't know if I'm able to trust where we're going. And for women, they say that when it comes to gender bias, that men need respect. That's their hierarchy of their most valued need. And for women, it's really security. Will I be safe with you? Can I entrust in you? When I click the light switch, are the lights going to come on? And then, of course, there's that feeling of being blindsided. I'm walking along believing it's this, and now I've discovered it's that. And that ground shaking type of environment can really be painful for individuals. And we also want to know, take into account the emotional shock of it all. Because again, there is nothing more devastating than to think you are anticipating one set of goals, one set of values, or a certain balance, as it was with the couple that was dealing with also to the payday loans. And when he missed that, and how that attachment came directly to their banking account, that emotional shock was just more than she could bear. Actually, she was, and the way she discovered that was that she had written a check to her child's daycare, and the daycare provider told her that the check bounced. And so it really, that emotional shock and the shame and the embarrassment and all those things that go along really can really kind of rock your trust. Next slide. And then we want to talk about the impact that it has on our relationship. Again, breakdown in communication, not being able to understand, because many people do not have the wherewithal to just be honest, you know, with the, hey, I messed up, here's the problem, let's try to figure out a solution. And then it increases arguments. I mean, if you were arguing before and you didn't have money problems, trust me, you're going to be arguing a lot more once that's discovered. And then it's the loss of emotional closeness. It is hard to be emotionally close to someone you feel has betrayed you. And again, we really want to state that this is a sense of betrayal. And then there's that situation of difficulty trusting again. I have a close friend who is a divorce lawyer. She's a divorce financial advisor, meaning her clientele is divorcees. So she helps women preparing for divorce how to become financially sound prior to the divorce and what preparations to do. And so she and I work together many times because she'll send clients to me and to help them with the budgeting and some of the forecasting and things of that nature. And many of them say right off the bat, I am never, ever, ever going to trust anyone again. Or I'll never, ever trust anyone financially again. I will always have separate accounts because I was blindsided, because I didn't know, or because it cost me so much financially. I will never do that again. So again, that can have an impact not only in your current relationship, but also your future relationships. Next slide. So, what are the warning signs? Again, how do you prevent yourself from being blindsided? Well, you want to know when someone just doesn't want to have the budgeting conversation. Sometimes it could be as simple as, in one instance, I was dealing with a couple, and she was asking what his annual salary was. And he said that that was something that she didn't need to know. What he needed to know from her was what was his financial commitment in terms of the bills. And so he wanted to avoid that money conversation, and felt as if she didn't have the right to know what the annual salary was, but he was committed to contributing financially to what his monthly portion was, because he had been previously divorced. And so he had his own money traumas that he was working through. Defensive when asked, you know, whether it's, hey, how much did that cost? Did you buy that in cash? Did you put it on a credit card? When you're unable to just discuss the financial environment, that should be a red flag. Missing financial information. Some of these individuals, when you file taxes separately and you have separate accounts and everything is separate, that should be a red flag. Not so much that financial infidelity is going on, but basically you're not being aligned with goals and financial goals and what responsibilities are. And that's something that maybe you need to discuss. And then unexplained debt, again, or spending. If someone shows up with something new, and especially if you don't think that they're able to afford that, where's that extra income coming from? Was it gifted? Do they have access to other financial avenues? Again, all warning signs of financial infidelity. Next slide. And then again, remember I told you we would be talking about romantic scams. Many times, people are involved, and they used to say that it was always the elderly that were involved in these romantic scams. But technically, anybody could be subject to this, especially the very online environment in which we live now, with all the dating apps and things of that nature. And again, I've seen these AI photos where things are all filtered and look different and look pretty, and people really don't know the real person. There used to be a comedian who said, you know, are you meeting them or their representative? You know, and again, that's something to consider. And again, oftentimes these scams begin online. They use emotional connection because here's the thing. We, believe it or not, with all the advances we have now with technology and everything else, they say that, especially since COVID, that we have proven to be more lonelier now than we ever were before. And it's only because we've been so siloed, either in our homes or having so much online connectivity that we don't have human connectivity. So again, people have such huge emotional needs that aren't being met. So it makes them very subject to these romantic scams. And then, of course, the online person typically requests secrecy. No, I'm going through a divorce and no one can know. Or I've heard stories that said, you know, I'm doing this for your protection. My ex is crazy. Um, I had one client who's was dating someone and he didn't want any pictures of them on social media. So she would take pictures and it would be of his hand holding a drink or something, you know, just really crazy. And we were also concerned that she was being scammed. That's hasn't proven out yet, but again, this request for secrecy caused a red flag. And then, of course, the actual result in financial loss. And when this happens to many, many people, it's almost as if it's like pulling a thread. So if they're in it by $1,000, sometimes they don't think it's anything wrong with giving more money. Like I'm already in for 1,000. So it doesn't matter if I give more. And I believe in this person. And again, with that emotional connectivity and all those things, and the need to be right many times happens in these romantic scams. And believe it or not, a lot of these are strong women, uh, college educated, great, strong in their careers, and they just don't want to admit that they've been had. Next slide. So, what's the shame that's associated that once you fall into this trap? Um, the victims blame themselves. Like I said, I should have known better. I should have been smarter. They have fear of being judged. Again, here I am at this corporation. I'm managing $1 million budget, but I wasn't able to see this for what it was. And then there's that delayed disclosure. Many times you'll find out way after the fact that that's what they went through and that's what they're dealing with, as well as the emotional manipulation by the scammer. And sometimes the scammer will threaten to expose them, after they've already taken advantage of the one. So many times they stay involved in these relationships just to keep the secret a secret. Next slide. So we were talking earlier, remember I told you that some individuals believe in separate finances in a relationship. And again, there is no right or wrong way to handle your finances, but it can be done in a healthy and a normal way. And what it requires is just communication, just like we were speaking earlier with Sharon. Um, while they had a combined vision of how their money would work, and then they talked about if it falls in this situation, we'll do this. If it falls in this situation, we'll do that. Those lines of communication helps with a shared vision so that everybody can stay on the same page. And then, of course, transparency still matters. So let's say, for instance, I've seen in relationships when they were doing the 50-50 split where someone says, I'm paying the cable bill, the light bill, the this and this, and all these bills amount to the same dollar amount. You still need transparency if someone else is responsible for that. Meaning, hey, I need the passcode, I need the login for this account. Let's go over and make sure that everything's up to date. So even if you don't have the physical responsibility, making sure you're having the money management meetings to make sure transparency is there. And again, that's where that shared awareness, that is the key. I can't tell you, I've dealt with widowers who did not know basic banking account information, login information, where the financials were kept, simply because one person handled everything. Next slide. So when we talked about how was it discovered, again, we'll talk about unexpected bills. You can get bank alerts. And again, checking the mailbox is key. I know sometimes in all these new home housing relationships, there's a mail bank and one person has the key and one person always checks the mail. Every now and then, check the mail yourself and make sure you know what's coming to the house and what's being sent. Run a credit report. Have credit reports ran, and you can get 3 free credit reports a year. I recommend going to each agency once per quarter so you can compare TransUnion to Experian. And if you need help with that, you can always reach out to a coach. But run credit checks, because not only that, not only can you spot infidelity, you can also spot fraud. And believe it or not, a lot of fraud happens amongst family members as well as romantic partners. So that's one of the reasons you definitely want to do that. And then, of course, third-party disclosures. Whether when you're, I know recently I was dealing with a couple who was getting their, looking to get to buy a vehicle. And not only did she pull the credit report, there were several things listed as third-party disclosures, which led her to look into other things. So those third-party disclosures can really give you a lot of information. Next slide. So what's the first step in healing? If you've had the breach, if you had something happen, now what do we do? First of all, we have to have full and complete honesty. Where do we go from here? What are we talking about? How do we want to move forward? Is it something that's recoverable? That's hugely important. And then, and if we are going to move forward in that, that must mean that all secrets must stop. Back to full transparency and full honesty. And then sharing complete information, because sometimes we either work off of misinformation or no information. And again, we need complete transparency and giving all information. And I always say, especially once you've had a breach and you're trying to get back on track, dig it all up. Go for the gusto. Put it all on the table so you're not re-traumatized as you continuously find out information. So just say, look, I know it's bad and I am upset, but I want to know it all. Give it to me right now. And then commit to the transparency from that day forward and as things continue to come up. Because a lot of times, especially if you're really digging your way, say a lot of debt was accumulated and now you've decided that you're going to address the debt. Well, sometimes that may be a very long process of getting out of that debt, getting out of that hole. And because of that, that may feel as if that trauma is continuing to happen because it may take a year or 2 years to get out of it. So get to where you have the full transparency. And with that transparency, also give yourself permission to be mad again and say, you know what? I'm still frustrated about that. I know we've dealt with it, but I had a trigger happen and it reminded me of how mad I am. And I just want to express to you I'm mad. You know, I know it's old stuff, but today it felt new. And be sure you have that freedom to do so. Next slide. So we want to make sure that we know that emotional repair comes first. So you have to tell someone, let's be honest, you hurt me. I felt betrayed. And you can listen without being defensive. And you don't have to defend your right to be hurt. No matter, because someone could say, oh, that wasn't a big deal. Oh, get over it. Oh, that happened so long ago. If someone's minimizing your pain, they're truly not acknowledging your hurt. And you want to make sure that you're able to get the hurt out, because sometimes not being heard and someone not acknowledging your hurt, that's going to continue the trauma. And so you want to make sure that you have that ability to voice that and building emotional safety. And that's what I mean about being able to come back and say, you know what? I want to tell you, not only did it hurt me, but it hurts me when you minimize the fact that I'm telling you that it hurts me. All right, let me check in with you guys. Does anyone have any comments about some of the information we've shared thus far?
Not as much a comment about what's been shared thus far, but I was just wondering if the PowerPoint can be sent out via email.
Absolutely. All right, next slide. All right. So what's kind of some stabilizing things we can do after the betrayal? Set boundaries. And create safeguards, whether that's a money management meeting. And I often talk about in relationships how we have to have check-ins on different things. If money has to be separate, just call it a money check-in. And today we're going to talk about budget so that everyone can kind of emotionally prepare to get in that space to talk about it so we know what we're dealing with. But I often say it's always best to compartmentalize problems and address them just with that problem in and of itself. So don't talk about the money, the kids, the this, the that, because sometimes that gets to be too much. Just isolate it, make sure it's a short time frame. Sometimes do a preset agenda. Just think about the most effective meetings you had as a student or as an employee or employer. Set those boundaries and those meeting limits the same way you do in your personal life. So it kind of prepares someone. I heard a psychologist recently say, when you have to deliver bad news, it's always best to give someone a precursor. Hey, this evening I want to talk about X. And then that way that person can prepare to receive the bad news and then prepare to have a connected activity after the bad news. So you want to pause before making major decisions, especially after the betrayal. I know that one situation I was working with a couple and they were working on saving for a wedding. And she had been diligently saving on her portion. He was not diligently saving on his portion. So when they had to have a venue change and they needed additional money, she was like, well, if you just pull this much from the wedding account and I'll pull this much, we'll be able to make the change. And he was like, I ain't got it. And she was like, what do you mean you don't have it? And then that prompted her to look and see what the balance was. And the truth was he was not saving. Then there became questions. Do you not want to get married? This, that, and the other. All those things. So again, making sure, but what he wanted to do was he wanted to get past that point and just put it on the credit card. So he wanted to pass the betrayal and make the major decision to put his portion on a credit card without having the discussion of the who, what, when, and why. So again, that was a betrayal. There needed to be a pause before another major decision was made on whether or not they should be moving forward or not. And then focus on safety. Is this a safe space? With the person that was dealing with the person with the gambling addiction, it did not become safe for her to put major savings. They had to put safeguards in place to eliminate him having full access because of the gambling addiction. So again, depending upon what the issue is, that depends on what safeguards need to put in place. Next slide. And then combining finances after betrayal. And again, this can be done. It can be done in a gradual process. It doesn't have to all be at once, as long as there's a clear agreement, ongoing transparency, and rebuilding the boundaries and the confidence. And again, that's something that can easily be shared. There's a great app that I love called Honeydew, and it's the dew is DUE, like a bill being due. And the great thing about Honeydew is it allows you to kind of separate the contribution of a couple. So for instance, say someone makes 40% more than one partner, but they want to split the bills 50-50. Well, if they're splitting the bills 50-50, but this person still makes 40% more than the other person, then the other person is going to have less discretionary income because they just actually make less. So what the Honeydew it'll allow you to go in and make the split instead of 50-50. It could be a 60-40 or a 70-30 so that it comes out more evenly financially for the person earning less. So I absolutely love that app. And then I also love Monarch. Monarch is a free app, but the paid version actually gives you more capability, but it's a great way for couples to start building a financial future together using budgeting tools. Next slide. So practical models for recombining money should be joint bills, separate spending. Again, much like I said with those two apps, you can use those budgeting tools, have the weekly or monthly check-ins, and just make sure you just have full visibility. This is where we are, this is where we're headed, and this is how we want to utilize this. And understand this, just because you set a plan in place doesn't mean it has to be the rock solid plan that it is. You can start, you can make adjustments, you can do whatever you need to do to make sure you get it right. Because circumstances are going to change, things are going to change, and you have to have that flexibility in order to make that happen. Next slide. So what are some non-negotiables? Again, you must be transparent. You got to have accountability. And there has to be consistency. And then you want follow-up and follow-through. Again, making sure that you're going through these weekly meetings with that same thing. I know you were supposed to do this. Now did you do that? Making sure that you're doing everything you possibly can to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Next slide. And then long-term prevention. Regular money conversations. Talk, 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 talk. That's really the only way it's going to work. Having clear expectations. This is what I want. This is what I need. Having that emotional awareness. I often say with that, you don't want to build resentment. Resentment is the quiet argument waiting to explode. And so you want to make sure that you're just not sitting there, not sharing what your emotional needs are. And then, of course, you want to seek help early. If you find out that you're not able to come up with a communication, not able to come up with a plan, get the help that you need. Next slide. Healing is possible. And what does it take? Again, back to that honesty that creates safety. You want support that helps the recovery. For instance, you don't want to be with someone, or you don't want to be in supportive groups that are not supporting your vision, your goal. Remember when I talked about earlier about some of those cultural bends where they were saying women should hide money on the side and not be transparent? If that's not your vision for your life, again, that might not be the supporting ear that you need listening to you or getting your advice from. And healthy money habits can be learned. Again, this is a long journey, and we're going to figure it out, and we'll figure it out together. Next slide. Again, you want to make sure you're getting the help, but getting the right help. Find the support you need, whether that's a financial coach, whether that's a therapist. There's social media groups for people like, say, like the Dave Ramsey group that are trying to get out of debt. There's church groups. There's all types of things you can do to get the help that you need. Next slide. And then, of course, you can always connect with us. You can reach us at fincoach@hccs.edu. There are currently 4 coaches on staff. Any one of us will be able to help you, and that's my contact information. Thank you so much for spending the time with me today, and I'll open it up to questions or comments, and let me know what was the most important thing you learned today. Anything in the chat, Jana?
Lots of thank yous. Also, I'm going to put in here a survey you can take to let us know what you thought of this. I found it very helpful. I learned a lot today.
Well, good. Well, we're here to help, and we also understand this too. Money conversations are difficult to have. So in a group setting, sometimes it's hard to get your questions asked and answered. So that's why sometimes a one-on-one really works best. So just know that we're here to help, and we'll do everything we can to give you exactly what you need.
And so I want to thank all of you for coming today and taking time out of your day busy days to come to our webinar and learn all about financial wellness. Thank you, Janice, for coming and speaking with us today.
Thanks, guys. Y'all have a great day.
You too. Bye, everyone.